talk to me. We just jumped into a lift. We pressed ground. We're on level 30. We've got about 30 seconds. Who are you? If I was to say, Mariam, explain who you are, can you kind of do that without saying what you do for work?
Oh, Glenn, why? No, I definitely can. I am a teacher. I think that is the simplest way to put it.
Yeah.
That was the OG career that I wanted when I was a little child, actually. So I'm going to take a moment to be happy for little Mariam. I like to teach, and my main area of expertise is violence prevention. So what that's ended up looking like is a lot of different things. But what is driving me is I want to help people become more holistic, healthier versions of themselves, to lead themselves from within so that we can make sound decisions for ourselves and our futures. Yeah.
So, and this is hard, right? Because, and I think it's harder for people who may be self-employed and are doing their passion from an early age. Like I was into personal finance when I was 16, 15, 14. And so it's almost a lot of who I am. And the same with you, like you've got your own business, you're effectively teaching and doing money stuff. And we started of who you are, and it did go to the core of what you do. So it's very hard.
I know.
So if I press rewind, as a young woman, when you, like what age did you think that you liked to be a teacher or wanted to be a teacher?
I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years old when I was first pretending to be a teacher. And I think it's so funny. The things that were true for me at that age are the things that are true of me today as well. And in the middle, there was just a whole great tangent that I went on because I was following other people's advice. But really, it all came full circle back to I like teaching. I like to learn something and then immediately share it with my people. I like to create. I was always an artist. It used to be paintings. Then I did a film degree. I like to create, whether it's through my word or through a physical creation. That was true of Mariam then, and it's true of Mariam today. So some of the core things about me, they've stayed exactly the same.
Yeah, it's because I've learned like recently, you can change behaviors. It's really hard to change who you are.
The essence of a person.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe we are born with that essence. And as children, we know it very clearly. But then over time, with the various systems that we kind of have to exist in, education, workplaces, etc., that were built to kind of fit people into a box because they were meant to churn out industrial workers, not entirely relevant anymore, but we still follow the same systems.
Yeah.
So we lose, trying to fit ourselves into those boxes, we lose that essence. And those of us who are lucky enough will eventually circle back to it. But I really believe we're born knowing very clearly who we are and what I'm here to do.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people might be thinking there's an accent there. It's not the traditional Glenn James "G'day, mate." Before we press go, you talked about you had family in London. Where did the accent come from?
Oh, yeah. So I'm Pakistani, born and bred in Pakistan. I moved to Australia when I was 19, and I've lived about as many years in Australia now. So certain things that I learned in Australia, I'll say in an Aussie way, like the word Australia. I don't say Australia or Melbourne or Cairns or Macca's.
Okay, so you're mid-30s-ish.
31.
31.
Yeah.
Oh, 19. Yeah, okay. So you're coming up on, half-half.
Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
What was it like? Because when you're 19 or, 18, you've gone through those very influential years of your life, right? Where, I can say, what's your favourite music? It's probably going to go back to when you're 16, right?
Oh,
or
yeah.
stuff like that. Like you've almost formed. What was it like coming to a different country at that age? As opposed to people say, oh, we moved to Australia when I was 4 and this is all I know. So how's that contrast been for you?
Yeah, I think it was, I remember so clearly the flight to Australia. It was a momentous occasion in my life. I had experienced violence back home and I was moving so I could rebuild a life away from violence. Living in Pakistan in the 90s and noughties was hard to escape violence. And I remember getting on that flight and I had so much excitement because I realized on the plane that I essentially have a blank canvas now. I'm going to a place where nobody knows who Mariam is. I can be whoever I choose to be, but most importantly, I can be me. Growing up there, I had to leave. I didn't have to. I chose to because it felt safer to live a double life. I was only really me with my close friends where it was a safe space to be me. But outside of that, I fit into whatever boxes I had to fit into. Good Muslim girl, good student, la-di-da. I fit into the boxes I had to fit into to get by. But it was so far removed from who I am at my core.
So it must be almost relaxing to not have to be a chameleon anymore.
It is so much labor, Glenn, living
Do you
the
think
double life.
that it happens with a lot of people in Pakistan?
Yes. Not just in Pakistan. It's a cultural thing. I think it's a collectivist culture thing.
Is that a Middle East thing or a Islam thing or?
I think it's just a collectivist culture thing because I know it's true for South Asians living everywhere in the world. Younger South Asians feel often the need to live the double life so that they can have harmony with their parents, intergenerational harmony at the cost of self. But I also know that's true for other collectivist cultures like Islander cultures, Indigenous cultures, where younger generations may have different ideas or values to their elders, but a collectivist culture has a certain protocol that has to be followed when it comes to intergenerational relationships. So instead of bringing everyone to the table and having honest, raw conversations, we choose to live the double life.
Yeah, put the facade up.
Yes, which is easier in the short term, but my gosh, it's so hard in the long term. It's like a whole web of lies.
Did you come from wealth in Pakistan?
I did. I come from a middle-class family.
Yeah. And is the accent-ish an international school?
That's right.
Yeah.
So I
guess the reason I ask that is not everyone would have the opportunity to immigrate to another country.
No.
I would imagine not everybody would have the opportunity to go to an international school.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I also had passport privilege because my parents used to live in Australia in the 70s and then moved back to Pakistan. That's why this place, I always had the passport, but as a child, and other people did say to me, Mariam, you're so lucky, but it never clicked to me until that moment where I realized I will either live here and die or I get out of here. But if I get out of here, where do I go? Because it won't be with the full blessing of my family. So I may be able to get some support from them, but it's not like they will want to or be able to bankroll everything. So where can I go? And then I realized why. Why did everyone say I'm so lucky to have an Aussie passport? Because all I need is a ticket to get to Australia, and then I can figure it out from there, which is obviously not something everyone can do.
Yeah, and like I will say, when people say, what's the best thing about my job, right? I'll tell you the worst thing. It's like actually doing the work and recording podcasts. I get a bit sick of it. But like I love when I meet people like you that if I never did this podcast, I wouldn't be able to actually learn about you and your culture and your history. And it's made me a better person doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Because sitting down, learning that you effectively were in this place, you've come here, it just makes me a more open and accepting person, if that makes sense, because I've removed myself from this bubble that I was living in.
Yeah.
And that's why if I ask questions, and I don't know if they might be insensitive or because I just don't know.
Yeah, no, I like that you ask questions, Glenn. I understand that not everyone may be open to receiving all of those questions.
Yeah.
But I am, because I know that I have capacity to have this conversation. And then the follow-on impact is you see more in the world.
Yeah.
But then everyone who looks up to Glenn also sees more in the world. For me, that's a happy place to be.
Because I've not had a in-depth conversation with someone who grew up in Pakistan.
Yeah.
I've known people that visited there, and I've probably got 2 questions, and then we'll move on because I want to talk about money.
Yeah.
The violence that you kind of grew up with, was that more of a societal, neighborhood, systemic violence thing, or within family type stuff?
It was both.
Okay.
So growing up at that time, and things are different now. I haven't lived there in a long time, so this is not the contemporary truth of that place. But I grew up in Karachi, which is Pakistan's biggest metropolitan. And when I was growing up, the Afghan war was well ongoing, and we had a big influx of refugees coming to settle in Karachi and people from rural Pakistan coming to settle in Karachi. Karachi is a mammoth of a city. It has, within one city, the total population of Australia. But it's like you can go from one end to the other in 1 hour. That's how many people are crammed into this small area. So there's a lot of inevitable violence that results from that overcrowding. And that looks like street violence.
Yeah.
Sure. But it was mostly political violence that was heavily impacting like everyone's lives, you know, like we had to check the route to our school because we heard a bomb go off, you know, so which way are we taking to school? Is the school on today? Or, you know, like there was a lot of political violence, and then family violence, that's just commonplace. Growing up in Pakistan, I don't know what it is like now, but that was very commonplace.
Do you think it was the external pressures just crept in? Like, because if you think about it, as obviously if there was a family, maybe not so obviously because I don't have a family, but I'm just thinking it's if there was a family and there was external stresses, financial, societal, all the things, just adds pressure to the situation.
True.
And I mean, I don't think there's ever any excuse for violence, but yeah, I don't know. It's just.
I think it's a bit of both. I think they both contribute to each other.
Yeah.
Because I do believe like.
I mean, there's a lot of wealthy people here that are violent.
Exactly. I think peace communally is created through individual peace and vice versa, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think they both influence each other. Violence is quite visceral. It's almost like I can't take a step there without seeing or hearing or experiencing some kind of violence. A lot of violence, particularly against women, is incorporated into policy, you know, so it's systematized.
Yeah, systemic, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no escaping it.
And then my next question, I don't know if it's real or an exaggeration. A friend of mine visited Pakistan probably early 2000s, and he said he saw a body on the side of the road and people just walking past it. Just like no one cared. The life wasn't valued. And that could have just been the area that he was in or whatever, but he said it was very eye-opening.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, if you live in a place where war is common and you wake up every day to hundreds and hundreds of deaths in your city, thousands in your country. How are you meant to move on with your day if you were to stop and mourn every life lost in the way that we want to or are meant to? I would probably never have gone to school if we had a day off for every day that we had a bombing.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
It's a different world. We try our best to just keep living life while, a lot is crumbling. And particularly at that time, again, things are different now.
Yeah.
At that time, it would have been violent because there was, lots of overflow of war into Pakistan, flowing all the way down to South where I was. And there was a lot of political turmoil, a lot of systemic violence like that. And I get what your friend is saying. I only realized that after I moved to Australia and my second year here or something, there was the Lint siege.
Oh, yes.
And to me, I worked in Sydney City at the time, just down the road. We closed up, went home. But I didn't understand what the fuss was about. It was one gunman. I, at that time, thought big deal. So what?
Because of the contrast of, well, that's nothing compared to what I've grown up with every freaking day.
And 2 years obviously is not enough time for me to have healed from where I was coming from. I was still very much in that survival state. And I was like, it's one gunman. There's only so much he can do. He will run out of bullets even if he shoots everybody.
Yeah.
And so the way we're living, what's going on inside is unimaginable, Glenn. If the only life you've ever known is growing up anywhere in a metropolitan city in Australia, it's just kind of beyond your imagination to understand what that's like. And at that time when the Lint siege happened, I was like, man, either there is something seriously wrong with me or there's something seriously wrong with everyone else in Australia. Of course, it was me and my experience, in time as I healed from all of that violence, I realized why people were reacting that way. And I was like, oh yeah, as you should.
Yeah.
Good for you. Good for all of us that we live in a country where life is so precious that should one person be shot dead, it's going to make national news. But that's not the world I come from.
So everyone, just hearing that, next time you're about to have a go at the teenager working at Macca's for not having your latte hot enough, what about you chill out for 10 minutes?